The Montana wilderness held its breath on that frigid December night. Thomas Reed shouldered his rifle, following tracks that made no sense, prints too light for a deer, too precise for a bear. 20 years of hunting these mountains had taught him every animal's pattern, but these were different. Wrong. The full moon cast silver shadows through skeletal branches, and Tom's breath came out in steady clouds. He'd promised himself this would be his last hunt of the season, but something about those tracks pulled him deeper into the forest. The wound in his leg, a souvenir from his military days, ached with the cold. A sound caught his attention, not the whisper of wind through pines or the distant call of an owl, but something between a hum and a whisper. Tom crouched, years of training taking over as he moved silently toward its source. The sound led him to a small clearing, and what he saw there made him question everything he knew about the world. A woman knelt in the snow, but she wasn't human. Her skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like northern lights, casting a soft blue glow on the white ground around her. Her long hair seemed to float as if suspended in water, defying gravity. But what struck Tom most was her eyes, completely silver, like liquid mercury, and filled with both intelligence and fear. She was clearly pregnant, her swollen belly protected by what looked like armor made of living crystal. Blood the color of starlight trickled from a wound in her shoulder, staining the snow beneath her with otherworldly light. Tom's finger tensed on his rifle's trigger, not to shoot but from pure instinct. The alien woman made no move to flee or fight. Instead, she pressed one hand to her belly and raised the other in what was unmistakably a plea for help. Please. The word formed in his mind rather than his ears, accompanied by images of pursuit, of danger, of a desperate flight across stars. Before Tom could respond, a low growl rumbled through the clearing. 3 mountain lions emerged from the shadows, drawn by the scent of alien blood. They were massive specimens, winter-lean and hungry, and they moved with deadly purpose. Tom had a choice to make. Everything he knew about the world told him to back away, to let nature take its course, to not get involved in something so far beyond his understanding. But everything he believed about himself, about humanity, demanded something else entirely. He raised his rifle, but not at the alien. The first shot cracked through the night air like thunder, sending one mountain lion scrambling back. The second shot went wide as another cat launched itself toward him. Tom rolled, his bad leg screaming in protest, and came up firing. The big cat fell mid-leap. The alien woman moved with impossible grace despite her condition. Her hand glowed with energy, and a pulse of light sent the third mountain lion flying backward into a tree with a sickening crack. Silence fell over the clearing. Tom's ears rang from the gunshots, his breath coming in quick bursts as adrenaline coursed through his system. The alien woman swayed, her bioluminescence dimming dangerously. Help, the word-image combination came again, weaker this time. My child, they will die if they find us. Who? Tom asked aloud, though he had a feeling she understood. Images flashed through his mind, beings of shadow and metal, a civilization of crystal and light torn by war, a desperate escape across the void of space. He saw himself through her eyes, a potential savior or executioner, his next choice determining not just her fate but that of the unborn child she protected. Tom looked at his rifle, then at the wounded alien woman. He thought about his empty cabin 5 miles north, about the medical supplies he kept there from his military days, about the choice between walking away from this impossible situation or diving headfirst into something that would change his life forever. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and stepped forward, offering his hand. I'm Tom, he said simply. And you're not dying out here tonight. Either of you. The alien woman's silver eyes seemed to brighten, and her fingers, cool and smooth like polished stone, clasped his hand. As he helped her to her feet, the first light of dawn began to break over the mountains, painting the sky in colors that seemed to match the gentle glow of her skin. Tom didn't know it then, but that moment would be remembered by 2 civilizations as the beginning of something extraordinary. For now, though, he had just one mission, get this woman and her unborn child somewhere safe before whatever was hunting them caught up. The trek to Tom's cabin tested every ounce of strength they had. The alien woman, who had conveyed through her telepathic images that her name was Vea, struggled with each step. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered like dying stars, and the crystalline armor around her abdomen pulsed with a concerning rhythm. Tom half-carried her through the deepening snow, his own leg protesting the added weight. The sunrise painted the sky in brilliant hues, but they couldn't appreciate its beauty. Every snapped twig made them freeze, every shadow could hide a pursuer. By the time his cabin came into view, nestled among towering pines, both were exhausted. Almost there, Tom murmured, though he knew she understood more through his intent than his words. The mental images she shared had become weaker, concerning him more than her physical wounds. Inside the cabin, Tom's military training took over. He laid Vea on his bed and gathered his medical supplies, trying to ignore how surreal it felt to be treating an alien in his hunting cabin. The wound on her shoulder wasn't from any weapon he recognized, it looked like a burn, but the edges crystallized as if frozen mid-damage. Vea's hand caught his wrist as he examined the injury. Images flooded his mind, a weapon that crystallized organic matter, turning living tissue to brittle mineral. Her people could heal such wounds, but it required. The vision shifted to the cabin's wood stove. Heat. She needed heat to prevent the crystallization from spreading. Tom worked quickly, stoking the fire and moving Vea closer to its warmth. As the temperature rose, her bioluminescent patterns brightened, and the crystalline edges of her wound began to soften. Her relief flowed into his mind like a cool stream. "Your pursuers," Tom said, keeping his thoughts focused on the question. "Who are they?" The answer came in fragments, images too alien for him to fully comprehend. He saw a society built in crystal spires that reached into clouds of perpetual aurora. Vea's people, the Lumini, had achieved harmony between organic life and crystalline technology. But there were others, the Obsidian Directive, who believed in absolute control through full crystallization, the conversion of all organic life into programmable mineral. Vea was a scientist who had discovered something that threatened the Directive's power, evidence that complete crystallization led to eventual degradation. Organic elements weren't flaws to be eliminated, but essential components of a sustainable future. Her pregnancy complicated matters further. Her child would be born with unprecedented abilities to bridge the organic and crystalline states. The Directive wouldn't just kill them. They would convert them, turn them into mindless crystalline drones. The thought made Tom's jaw clench. "You're safe here," he said, projecting as much certainty as he could muster. "Rest. Heal." As if in response to his words, Vea's crystalline armor shifted, revealing more of her bioluminescent skin. The patterns there told stories. He could see star maps, mathematical equations, and what looked like DNA helixes woven into the light. Her child moved within her, causing ripples of brighter light to cascade across her abdomen. Tom found himself sharing memories too, his time in the military, the wound that ended his service, his retreat to this quiet corner of Montana. He showed her why he understood the need to hide, to heal, to find peace in solitude. She absorbed these memories with a gentle empathy that made his chest tighten. As the day progressed, Tom secured the cabin, setting up old motion sensors from his military days. He prepared food, simple soup and bread, and was fascinated to watch Vea consume it. Her body seemed to process the organic matter instantly, converting it into energy that strengthened her bioluminescence. Night fell, and with it came new worries. If the Directive had tracked her to Earth, how long until they found this cabin? The northern lights danced outside his window, and for the first time, he wondered if they might be hiding something more sinister than atmospheric phenomena. Vea had drifted into a healing trance, her patterns pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. The crystalline growth around her wound had almost completely receded. Tom checked his rifle and settled into his chair, preparing for a long night's watch. As he studied her peaceful form, he realized that everything had changed. His quiet life of solitude had been shattered, replaced by something far more dangerous, and far more important. Somewhere up there, among those shimmering lights, enemies were searching. But they'd have to go through him first. A soft mental touch brushed his consciousness. Vea, even in her trance, sensed his protective thoughts. Her gratitude washed over him like warm sunlight. Tom smiled and settled deeper into his chair, rifle ready across his lap. Sometimes, he reflected, the most important battles weren't fought on any battlefield, but in the quiet moments when one person chose to stand between harm and those who needed protection. The warning came 3 days later, in the deep stillness before dawn. Tom's motion sensors triggered silently, their alerts blinking on his old military tablet. But it wasn't that which woke him, it was Vea's fear, hitting his mind like an icy wave. She stood by the window, her bioluminescent patterns dimmed to barely a whisper of light. Her hand rested protectively over her swollen abdomen, where the child within had grown remarkably over just a few days. The crystalline armor protecting her pregnancy now swirled with complex patterns that seemed to shift in response to her anxiety. They're here, her thoughts touched his mind, accompanied by images of dark ships sliding through the aurora borealis like ink through water. Tom moved silently to the window, his rifle already in hand. At first, he saw nothing but snow-laden trees and stars. Then he noticed it, places where the stars simply vanished, as if pieces of the night sky had been cut away. The shapes moved with deliberate precision, descending toward the forest surrounding his cabin. Vea shared a rushed series of images, the Obsidian Directives hunters, beings that existed in a state of partial crystallization, their organic cores preserved only enough to maintain their tactical creativity while their crystalline shells made them nearly invulnerable. How many? Tom thought, having learned to project his thoughts more clearly over the past days. 3 hunters, came the response, along with tactical data that made his military training sing with recognition. Their weapons could crystallize organic matter instantly, but they had limited range. They would need to get close. Tom's mind raced through options. His cabin sat backed against a cliff face, with a steep ravine to the east. The hunters would expect them to run, to try to lose them in the wilderness. That's exactly why they couldn't. The basement, Tom projected, sharing memories of the root cellar he'd expanded over the years. But first. He moved quickly, gathering specific supplies, blasting caps from his mining equipment, chemicals from his first aid kit, batteries from his emergency radio. Vea understood immediately, her scientific knowledge merging with his practical experience. Together, they prepared while the hunters closed in. The first attack came from multiple directions, crystalline spears that shot through the cabin walls like glass through paper. Tom and Vea were already moving, staying low as the deadly projectiles turned furniture and floorboards to crystal in their wake. Your kind harbors criminals now. The voice that pierced Tom's mind was like scraping metal, accompanied by images of absolute order, of worlds reduced to geometric perfection. Step aside, organic. This matter doesn't concern you. Tom's response was a precisely aimed shot at a propane tank he'd positioned outside. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn quiet, and more importantly, created a cloud of superheated steam. Their first discovery had been that extreme temperature changes could temporarily disrupt crystalline structures. Through their mental link, Tom and Vea moved in perfect synchronization. She channeled energy through her crystalline armor, creating shields of light that deflected the hunters' attacks, while Tom laid their trap. Each crystalline spear that missed its mark became part of their defense, growing into barriers that forced their attackers to move exactly where they wanted them. The hunters were ruthlessly efficient, their partially crystallized forms glinting in the moonlight as they maneuvered. They looked almost human in shape, but their movements were too perfect, too calculated. Their organic cores gave them creativity, but their crystalline shells had made them arrogant. That arrogance was about to cost them. Surrender the specimen, the lead hunter commanded. The child she carries will serve a greater purpose in our evolution. Vea's fury blazed through their mental link, her protective instinct amplifying her power. The patterns across her skin blazed like captive lightning, and Tom felt her prepare for something desperate. Now. Tom's mental command synchronized with their prepared defense. Vaya released a pulse of energy that turned the crystalline spears embedded in the cabin walls into resonating conductors. At the same moment, Tom triggered his improvised charges. The combination created a cascade of thermal shock that traveled through the crystalline network they'd allowed their enemies to create. The hunters' shells cracked, their perfect geometric forms suddenly riddled with weaknesses. They staggered, trying to adapt, to repair, but Tom wasn't finished. His next shots were precisely aimed at those cracks, the bullets finding the vulnerable organic cores within. 2 hunters shattered, their crystalline forms collapsing into inert shards. The third, however, managed to adapt. Its form liquefied and reformed, learning from the destruction of its companions. It launched itself toward Vaya with terrible purpose. Tom threw himself forward, knowing he couldn't reach her in time. But Vaya had one last surprise. The child within her responded to the threat, its developing powers manifesting through her. A wave of pure energy erupted from her crystalline armor, catching the hunter in mid-leap. The energy didn't destroy the hunter, it transformed it, forcing an instantaneous evolution of its crystalline structure into something new, something that merged organic and mineral in true harmony. The hunter crashed to the ground, its form shifting chaotically as it tried to process the change. Without its rigid crystalline programming, the organic mind within was free to think for itself for the first time in centuries. Impossible, its thoughts radiated confusion and wonder. The integration, it's perfect. Vaya sagged against Tom, exhausted but triumphant. Through their link, he felt her satisfaction. Her child had just proven her theory, forced evolution through crystallization wasn't the answer. True advancement came through harmony between organic and mineral, through choice rather than coercion. But they all knew this was just the beginning. The directive would send more hunters. The child's power would draw them like moths to a flame. As the sun rose over the shattered remnants of his cabin, Tom made a decision. They couldn't keep running, couldn't keep fighting defensive battles. It was time to take the fight to them. The transformed hunter, who called itself Nexus, proved to be an invaluable ally. Through its memories, shared in crystalline clear detail, Tom and Vaya learned the full scope of their danger. The Obsidian Directive had dispatched a warship, now hiding in the dark side of the moon, preparing for a full invasion force. They will not stop, Nexus projected, its form still shifting between crystal and organic states as it adapted to its new existence. The child represents everything they fear, proof that their path of forced evolution is wrong. Tom's cabin, or what remained of it, was no longer safe. They needed a new sanctuary, somewhere defensible but remote enough to avoid civilian casualties. Through their mental link, Tom shared his knowledge of an abandoned mining complex deep in the mountains. The extensive tunnels, reinforced with steel and concrete, could be their fortress. Vaya's pregnancy had accelerated rapidly. Her crystalline armor now pulsed with complex equations, the child within actively participating in their plans. Through their shared consciousness, Tom felt the baby's developing awareness, a mind that thought in patterns of both organic emotion and crystalline logic. They worked tirelessly to prepare the mine. Tom's military experience merged with Vaya's scientific knowledge and Nexus's tactical insights. They converted old mining equipment into defenses, using Vaya's understanding of crystalline technology to create hybrid weapons that could counter the Directive's forces. The first warning came from the Northern Lights. The aurora twisted unnaturally, forming geometric patterns that Nexus recognized as jump signatures. The Directive's forces were arriving. They're deploying crystalline sentinels, Nexus warned, sharing images of towering constructs that walked on legs of pure crystal, their bodies housing specialized hunter units. 5 units. More than they've ever committed to a single target. Tom positioned himself at the reinforced entrance of the mine complex, his modified rifle loaded with ammunition that Vaya had enhanced with her crystalline technology. The weapons would disrupt the enemy's crystalline matrix on impact, but they had to be precise. They had limited ammunition and even less time. Vea's sudden gasp echoed through their mental link. The baby was coming. Now. Tom's concern radiated through their connection. Can you delay it? The answer came not from Vea but from the child itself, images of tactical advantages, of power that could only be wielded at the moment of birth, when the barrier between organic and crystalline was at its thinnest. The child had chosen this moment. I will protect them, Nexus declared, its form solidifying into a perfect balance of crystal and flesh. Focus on the outer defenses. The first sentinel emerged from the tree-line, its crystalline body refracting the aurora's light into deadly patterns. Tom's enhanced bullet struck true, creating fractures in its structure, but the construct adapted quickly, sealing the damages almost instantly. Then the hunters came, dozens of them, their forms blurring between solid and liquid states as they advanced. They had learned from their fallen companions, their tactics evolved to counter the weaknesses previously exposed. Tom fell back into the mine entrance, triggering the first line of defenses. Crystalline charges detonated, creating zones of intense energy that disrupted the hunters' forms. But for every hunter that fell, two more pressed forward. Through his link with Vea, Tom felt the birth process accelerating. The child's power was building, creating pulses of energy that made the very rocks around them hum with potential. Nexus had created a protective chamber of living crystal around them, its own essence helping to stabilize the incredible forces being unleashed. A hunter breached the inner defenses, its form twisting into something nightmarish as it tried to reach the birth chamber. Tom met it head-on, his combat knife, now enhanced with crystalline technology, finding the vulnerable organic core within its shifting form. But the victory cost him. A crystalline shard penetrated his leg, the old wound flaring with new pain. The sentinels reached the mine entrance, their massive forms tearing through the reinforced steel like paper. Tom stumbled back, his leg threatening to give out, but he couldn't fail now. Through their connection, he felt Vea's pain and determination, felt the child's power building towards something unprecedented. Hold on, he projected through their link, pouring every ounce of his strength and will into the message. We're not done yet. The mine's tunnels echoed with crystalline screams as hunters advanced and died, as ancient rock was transformed into weapons of light and shadow. Tom fought with everything he had, each shot and movement guided by the perfect synthesis of his human instincts and the tactical knowledge shared through their mental link. But the directive's forces were overwhelming. As the sentinels breached the final chamber, their crystalline forms filling the space with cold light, Tom realized they were out of options. He limped to the birth chamber, prepared to make his final stand beside Vea and their unlikely family. What he found there changed everything. Vea lay within Nexus's protective crystalline sphere, her bioluminescent patterns blazing with impossible brightness. Above her, suspended in a matrix of light and crystal, was her child, their child, in a way, through the bonds they'd formed. And as the directive's forces converged on their position, as the very air crackled with building power, Tom understood that this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning of something far greater. The child's first cry wasn't a sound but a wave of pure energy that rippled through organic matter and crystalline forms alike. In that moment, as the directive's forces breached the chamber, time seemed to stand still. The baby hung suspended in the air, its skin shifting between deep blue luminescence and transparent crystal. Its eyes opened, revealing irises that contained entire galaxies, and its first conscious thought touched all minds present, organic and crystalline alike, with a clarity that brought even the sentinels to a halt. We are not meant to be divided. The child's consciousness expanded outward, carrying with it Vea's scientific understanding, Tom's human compassion, and Nexus's lived experience of transformation. The crystalline hunters found their rigid programming dissolving, replaced by a vision of what they could become, what they were always meant to be. Tom watched in awe as the first hunter stepped forward, its form rippling as it struggled between its programming and this new possibility. The child reached out, not with hands but with thought, offering not domination but choice. You fear chaos, the child communicated to the directive forces. You seek perfection through control. But true perfection lies in harmony, in the balance between order and freedom. The chamber filled with light as the child demonstrated this truth. Its own form was neither fully organic nor fully crystalline, but a perfect synthesis of both. Through their mental link, Tom felt Vea's joy and vindication, her theories made manifest in their child's very existence. But not all were ready to accept this change. The Sentinel commanders, their crystalline programming too deeply ingrained, raised their weapons. They would destroy this threat to their perfect order, even if it meant sacrificing their own forces. The child's response was not aggression but understanding. As the Sentinels fired their crystalline weapons, the energy was caught in a matrix of light created by the baby's innate power. The destructive force was transformed, turned back upon itself not as a weapon, but as an offer of the same choice given to the hunters. Even you, the child projected, can choose a different path. The crystalline matrix around the Sentinels began to shift, offering them a glimpse of what they could become. Some resisted, their forms shattering as they chose oblivion over change. Others began to transform, their rigid geometric patterns flowing into more organic shapes while retaining their crystalline strength. Tom moved to Vea's side, supporting her as she rose to witness the transformation. Through their connection, they shared this moment of triumph and hope. Nexus stood guard, its own form a testament to the possibility of change. The child descended slowly into Vea's arms, its power settling into a steady glow that pulsed in harmony with its mother's bioluminescence. When it spoke again, it was with the combined wisdom of both its heritages. The directive's path was born of fear, fear of chaos, of loss, of the unknown. But there is another way. We can choose to evolve together, to find strength in our differences rather than trying to eliminate them. The transformed hunters and sentinels knelt, not in submission but in recognition of a profound truth. The age of forced crystallization was over. A new era of voluntary transformation and cooperation would begin. In the days that followed, more of the directive's forces arrived, drawn not by orders but by choice. The abandoned mine became a sanctuary of a different kind, a place where both organic and crystalline beings could learn to find their own balance, their own path to harmony. Tom watched as Vea taught their child about both its heritages, as Nexus helped others through their transformations, as former hunters learned to embrace their organic aspects while maintaining their crystalline strength. His cabin lay in ruins, his solitary life transformed, but he had gained something far greater, a family that bridged the gap between worlds. The child grew quickly, displaying powers that merged science and nature in ways neither civilization had dreamed possible. It became living proof that the future belonged not to those who refused to change, but to those who could adapt while staying true to their core selves. As the aurora borealis danced overhead one evening, Tom stood with Vea and their child, watching the lights reflect off the crystalline structures that now grew in harmony with the mountain forest. Former hunters practiced their new abilities nearby, learning to create rather than destroy. Was it worth it? Tom asked silently through their link, thinking of that first night in the snowy clearing. Vea's response came in images of hope, of futures branching out like crystal formations, of civilizations learning from each other rather than fighting. The child added its own thoughts, pure certainty that this was always meant to be, that sometimes the universe conspired to bring together exactly the right people at exactly the right time. High above, the stars shone down on a world forever changed, where the line between organic and crystalline, between human and alien, had begun to blur. And in that blurring, something new and wonderful was being born, proof that the greatest adventures often begin with a simple choice to help someone in need.